Welcome back to the morning show. It's Wednesday. That means it's Wise Guy Wednesday. That's why Matt Sellon is here. Good morning, Matt.
That is right.
Good morning, Robert. Good
Looks
morning,
like
Dave.
you've got some fun stuff for us again today.
Oh, we're going to talk all about balancing. And so we're going to do an experiment, first of all.
Okay.
The question I asked last time was, if you stand with your back against the wall,
Matt,
and if you guys can just do this, right.
I'm not chicken. I just don't want to show the top of my head to the camera.
And if you bend over,
First time. I feel the
Great.
lines behind us were...
and now if you bend over as if you're going to touch your toes, see how close you can get to the wall without falling over.
Okay.
And you notice that Matt,
Yes!
Matt can't do that, and
I
Dave
can. I'm more limber.
And the reason you can do that has to do with something called center of gravity. And so let's think
Nothing
about
like being limber?
no. Maybe a little bit.
Okay, there you go.
Thanks, Matt.
And so the center of gravity is the average location of all the weight of an object. So for example, if you have...
I didn't want this answer after.
Oh, no, this is not a bad thing. And so this object, for example, has most of the weight at the top.
Right.
And if we want to balance this, why don't you see if you can balance that on your hand when moving it around. It's a little hard.
It's a little
but
hard.
The way you balance this is you have to keep the center of gravity of this thing directly above the pivot point, which is where your finger is. Okay, so that's kind of a tricky thing to do. And now, of course, when you're standing on the ground, you have a center of gravity which is above the pivot point, which is where your feet are.
Right.
And, of course, the pivot point can move a little bit because your feet are not just one little point. They're sort of wide. And so you need to keep your center of gravity directly above the little square that's enclosed by your feet, basically.
Okay.
And women have an easier time doing this bending over experiment because...
Our feet are smaller.
Because, well, no, that would go the other way. Because women
that's
tend
true.
to have a center of gravity which is slightly lower in their, in that region,
In the hips.
and
Okay,
men
you can
tend to
say
have,
it's okay.
and men tend to have a center of gravity which is up
Around
in their
their shoulders.
shoulders. So when men bend over like this, they teeter over forward because their shoulders are heavy, and women's shoulders are just smaller.
I just thought
that's
since
why-
we were better, but that's
Well, you
the
have
worst.
smaller shoulders. You didn't
There
want to
you
have
go.
big shoulders.
No,
One
that's
more
correct.
comment like that, we're going to reject you and bring Matt in. Okay.
Shoulder pads.
Okay, and
Yes.
so now, if you want to balance something by hanging it, it turns out that things like to arrange themselves so that the center of gravity is directly below the pivot point. And if the center of gravity is below, then it's not hard at all to balance. The thing just hangs there like this.
Right.
Okay, so we have all kinds of little demos here, where here we have like a little leaning tower of Pisa. The center of gravity of this thing is about here, and since the bottom of this thing extends a little bit beyond that, it doesn't teeter over because the center of gravity is to this side of the pivot point, which would be right here. If we put this little extra piece on top, it falls right over. Okay. If you bought these little cute birds, you've seen these before. Okay, they will balance on your finger, and they make a little Tweety bird sound. These things have a center of gravity which is actually below their nose because there's little lead weights in the tips of their wings.
Oh.
So that's why these things work the way they do. We have a big bird that we can balance like this because its center of gravity is below my finger right now. Okay? And there's all kinds of neat things that we probably don't have time to show here, but we can balance. You can do this at home with a couple of forks and a toothpick. You can do experiments where you can sort of balance things because the center of gravity is below the pivot point.
Oh, okay. Well, those are...
So everything has a center of gravity.
Everything has a center of gravity, and it's just a property of the object.
Okay.
Okay, what are we going to do in the next segment?
We're going to do a little bit of baseball, actually.
Yes.
It is that time of year.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Still ahead on the morning show, we're going to light up your life as we take you on another short trip in our Wish You Were Here segment.
Plus, with just a few clicks of the mouse, you can save tons of time by paying your bills online. But is e-banking safe and secure? Find out in the Good Housekeeping Report.